Good evening and welcome to Electronic Game Information. It's June 11th and we are coming to you live from E3 in beautiful downtown Los Angeles, California. First, tonight's headlines. Bethesda director Todd Howard did something unexpected at that company's weekend press conference. He apologized. He apologized for Fallout 4 and all of the spooky houses the game forced players to enter in search of valuable items. He is quoted as saying, "We saw other games like Resident Evil where you walk around in a big spooky house and we thought that works really well. What if we made just a large game map with hundreds of little spooky houses and let people roam freely? It seemed like a lot of fun. Apparently we just made a lot of very scared people do something they didn't feel was necessary, and that is not a good business model." This is a quote from one of the most powerful, most revered men in the games industry. It is remarkable to see a man at the height of his career humbled like this. And Todd Howard went on, "Knowing what I know now, I think I would make a different game. One that still involved finding valuable items, killing lots of people and animals, but with houses that have adequate lighting. I don't think a lot of people have done that. There's a tremendous opportunity for games built around lots and lots of well-lit houses." Electronic Arts, or EGI, announced they would be releasing a mini version of the classic, very popular 3DO. Inspired by the line of Nintendo classic mini consoles, these will come preloaded with a collection of curated titles including Killing Time, The Way of the Warrior, and the Atari Jaguar version of Aliens vs. Predator. That's great news for 3DO fans. And unlike those Nintendo classic consoles, the 3DO Classic will have a fully functioning disc tray. Well, I'd sure love to see one of those disc trays in action. Wouldn't that be something, seeing a disc tray in action again? I can imagine there's probably a man who owns a warehouse in the desert full of disc trays just looking to get rid of all that disc tray backstock. Perfect for the 3DO. And that wasn't the only big news for disc trays coming out of the weekend. Morrowind came out again, but just for a little while. Well, the E3 convention floor opens tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that the rough and tumble politics aren't already happening. We all know that E3 isn't just an extravagant trade show. It's not just about the games. It's a leadership contest for the dire council of game developers. Candidates for the post of the Dread Conciliator have been laying the groundwork and preparing their bids all year. We here at Electronic Game Information would like to dedicate a bit of time during each episode to profiling each of the top candidates. Tonight, we'd like to take a closer look at Q-Bit director Kentaro Yoshida. Mr. Yoshida is perhaps best known for the following quote about the relationship between game developers and game players. "You can know someone really well. You can spend a lot of time with that person. You can learn to anticipate their actions. But every once in a while, that person will do something completely insane, like break into a grocery store. Imagine the grocery store is the third-person shooter genre. How do you keep someone bent on criminality from breaking into the grocery store?" Mr. Yoshida's candidacy does come as a bit of a surprise. He mostly stayed under the radar following his work on Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, which were fine. They were fine. He has also spent several years single-handedly developing a follow-up to the 2002 Smile-Bit shooter Gun Valkyrie. The sequel, known only to his friends as Extreme Gun Valkyrie, has never been shown to anyone in the Dire Council. But rumor has it that Yoshida is hoping to use his position as the Dread Conciliator in order to excel Extreme Gun Valkyrie directly to the gaming public, bypassing the Dire Council completely. If this is true, bold move, Mr. Yoshida. Really looking forward to seeing where that franchise could possibly go. Ubisoft jolted the gaming community when they announced that the upcoming Assassin's Creed Odyssey would not in fact take place in ancient Greece, but rather current-day Thomasville, Georgia. The mayor of Thomasville, Tom Thomas, was brought out on stage in full Ezio Auditore cosplay to a round of applause that lasted for 15 full minutes and left the mayor in tears. Mayor Tom Thomas embraced Ubisoft CEO Rayman and said the following: "We knew that this was between us and ancient Greece as the backdrop. I really didn't think we had a chance. But when I invited the Ubisoft team down south and showed them the sinkhole that had just opened up in my son's front yard, Rayman looked at me and said, 'I want to jump in there, and so will the world.' He has such an amazing accent. It was really a special, special moment." Microsoft not to be outdone by mere software developers, made a big scene on Sunday. As usual, no cameras of any kind were allowed into the press event, so only confused scribblings and scratched memories serve as a record of what happened yesterday. The crowd was forced to sit in near complete darkness and silence for a full 10 minutes, while numerous shrouded figures wandered aimlessly on stage, whispering console exclusive into microphones. This unexpectedly cerebral and bold performance was then suddenly interrupted by a flash of light when Microsoft man Phil Spencer rushed on stage and yelled, "No one lives until they die!" He punched a brick wall until his fingers bled. He threw a knife into the audience. He pulled off 7 layers of clothes and was still wearing the same outfit underneath. He started to say the word Halo, but instead said, "Hell yeah!" Instead, he pretended to drive an invisible car. He jumped 7 feet into the air. The show seemed to come to an end when Phil Spencer hovered in the air, refusing the laws of physics to come down, but then he did, with one of those Superman shockwave and crouching landings. The crowd was having an amazing time. Imagine, because you have to, a room full of young people watching mountain man Phil Spencer defy the laws of physics. Unbelievable. They say that young people these days don't have it in them. No guts. But I saw them hopping like rabbits, slithering on the floor like caterpillars, and shouting the names of their fathers. And there was Phil Spencer. He didn't need to know the names of anyone's fathers, because here was a man at the height of his power and prestige, a man literally bursting with glowing blue mana energy, a glow that was getting brighter and brighter. No game or hardware was mentioned. Let's go to the phones. Go ahead, you're on the air with electronic game information.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm feeling great. How are you?
I love video games. It's my favorite time of the year because I get to see the video games.
Fantastic. What are you looking forward to at E3 this year?
I'm really hoping they announce a sequel to my favorite video game, A Dog's Life. It was on a PS2 system. It was a console exclusive.
A Dog's Life.
And
what kind of game was that?
Life. You played as a dog, and you had to walk around and smell things. And once you collected enough smells, you could go to the next land.
No. Can we have another caller, please? You're on the air with electronic game information. It's E3. Are you excited? Fantastic news.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, Robby.
Hey, how are you tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
Who is this?
This is Zach.
I don't know you.
Well, I was calling to talk to you about video games.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's E3, so it's probably the best time of the year to talk about video games. What are you excited?
Miyamoto.
I don't know who that is. Can we have the next caller, please? Hello, you're on the air with electronic game information. Well, I think we've had it for our first round of calls, but don't worry, we'll be taking calls throughout the evening here on Electronic Game Information. And now to our main story. Our main story tonight is, of course, one for the history books. The classic fighting game Battle Monsters will be coming back to all major consoles following a massive write-in and crowdfunding campaign led by die-hard Battle Monsters fans. Battle Monsters, the revolutionary fighting game of 1996. When it originally announced for the Sega Saturn, the result was instantaneous. Crowds of people came out of their houses, out of the arcades, and stood front to back outside of EB Games and Babbage's. Long lines of nearly every outside of nearly every video game store on the planet. This was it. 1996. The Cold War was over. Eastern Europe was free. There was a McDonald's in Moscow, and people the world over were demanding Battle Monsters for the Sega Saturn. It wasn't just the incredible graphics, that unbelievable combination of digitized characters, CGI backdrops, breathless scaling effects, and a foreground made entirely of candles. Rock gameplay gameplay, balanced to perfection. The library of special moves never seemed to end. Special moves like the jump over kick, the floating hand, creeping hand, kick bazooka, and bird kick. The levels were unlike anything seen before, a panoply of fully realized worlds unto themselves. Ice Valley. What happens when you cross the Antarctic with the Arctic and add a touch of mayhem? Dark Temple. What happens when you punch someone so hard they fall into a statue and it breaks on them? Underground. Half volcano, half cave, all dangerous. Floodgate. A forest of stone with water presumably somewhere off screen. The Floating Island, a flighting platformer's delight and a clear ancestor to the often overlooked Smash Brothers franchise. Each level was chock full of small details and Easter eggs meant to be evocative, interpreted. This wasn't just a fighting game with extra weird button combinations. This was a lexicon of everything that was disturbing and wrong about the world at that time. But the backbone of Battle Monsters was the backbone of all epoch-defining fighting games, the fighters. Each fighter was a distillation of the 1990s as a political, cultural, and historical tempest. Albiol, a mystic energy wraith whose special moves were oftentimes underpowered and overly complicated to execute. What better way to represent the growth of esoteric financial products and instruments that grew out of the capitalist free-for-all taking place in England during those tumultuous years between the defenestration of Margaret Thatcher and the rise of the New Left under Tony Blair. A growth that would eventually cross the Atlantic and culminate in the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. Chili and Pepper was not one character, but two incredible acrobats whose duality made them formidable battle monsters indeed. They were also a warning to the impending rise of the internet and the often dual nature of netizens. Netizens bouncing around like acrobats to different websites where identity is cheap and alter egos are free. Death Mask, a Frankenstein-esque creature, a walking golem, big and powerful, yet slow in movement, a shocking combination of the West's lagging, heavy-handed approach to the war in the Balkans. Fangor is a skeleton with red hair carrying a big sword. Dressdock, a cyclops with spikes on his shoulders and one on his head. Each spike represented one of the 3 stages of downfall for the apartheid regime in South Africa. The disinvestment and sanctions campaign, the talks between Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, and of course, universal suffrage, which led to Nelson Mandela being elected president. The Cyclops eye, of course, was the blind eye of the West as it turned itself away from totalitarian dictatorships across the developing world during the Cold War. And then there was Headless Harn. I don't want to talk about Headless Harn. I just don't want to talk about Headless Harn. Well, you can come up here and you can talk about Headless Harn, okay? That's just not something I want to talk about. Anyway, there were 6 more battle monsters, and that was not counting unlockable characters. This wasn't just a fighting game, this was a mirror held up to Western society. A perfectly executed kick bazooka. The game was released to nothing but accolades. GamePro called it, quite simply, the most original and brutal game we've seen since Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. But where Eternal Champions refused to take the final step away from idiotic, hand-drawn sprites and toward photorealism, Battle Monsters leaps like a creature into a stark and terrifying future. Run as fast as you can because Battle Monsters is really here. Game Players magazine reviewed it as magisterial, the culmination of tens of millions of gamers' dreams about how fighting games can evolve in the lead up to the 21st century. It is not enough to simply endorse the purchase of Battle Monsters. Instead, we recommend that you change your life completely in order to master it. But nothing can prepare the world for die-hard game fan and their reaction. After spending a week with our copy of Battle Monsters for the Sega Saturn, it is almost painful to imagine that we can continue to exist as a company. There are moments in life where we must question our purposes. For many of us here at GameFan, we believed our purpose was to act as overseers of the relatively new and maturing video game genre as it develops. We are in shock. We are in shock because Battle Monsters has erased any hope of seeing that process play out in a way we can understand. Every game we play and every game we review from now until we either die or this publication ceases to exist will have a single metric. Every video game made after the release of Battle Monsters will be paired to it. This unfortunate and unfair comparison is not an option. Battle Monsters is the barometer for the quality of video games from now until the sun crashes into the earth. This is not just the single most artistically considered and realistic video game ever created. It is the single most engrossing piece of digital media in existence. Battle Monsters will be released with the next major security update for all major home consoles and Windows computers. Like Fallout Shelter on the NVIDIA Shield, it will be a required download for all platforms. And now we'd like to hear from you. What are your Battle Monsters memories? Hello, you're on Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Battle Monsters.
Hi.
Hi. What's your favorite Battle Monsters character?
Headless Harn.
Headless Harn? Cut it off! Cut it off! I don't want any... Can we screen these calls for Headless Harn? Next up, you're on Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Battle Monsters, but not Headless Harn. You're on the air. Do you have any plans to purchase Battle Monsters? Do you have any hopes for Battle Monsters DLC? You're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Battle Monsters.
Well, of course, I would love some DLC for Battle Monsters.
Oh, that's wonderful news. What kind of DLC would you like?
Maybe like siblings to Headless Harn. Yeah.
You're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Battle Monsters.
Hey, so I actually really like the... What was it? The skeleton with the red hair?
Right, yeah, Fangor. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Fangor special move?
Really the one where he just throws his head at the enemy.
That's not Fangor. That's Headless Harn.
But he's a skeleton.
Cut him off. Battle Monsters, DLC, what are you thinking?
Are you trying to cosplay as Noctis?
What?
The person you're
We're talking about Battle Monsters for the Sega Saturn. It's being re-released as an HD remake. What do you think?
It looks awesome.
What's great about it?
How the graphics of Headless Harn. I like muscles.
All right, that's enough for the calls. Sick of talking about Headless Harn. We here at Electronic Game Information have been listening to you, the viewers, and we've heard that what you want from game shows, game news shows, is more discussions about video games as an art form. Well, we're not quite ready to give you that discussion, but we have been talking about other art forms that we think directly relate to video games. I'm talking, of course, about video poetry. Tonight, we have a special video poem exclusive to E3 2018 and dedicated to the re-release of Battle Monsters. Check it out. And now, the list. Tonight's list, exclusive Sega Saturn games. This isn't a perfect list, and it's not in any kind of order, but here we go. Astral, that was a 2D platformer. Albert Odyssey was a kind of role-playing game. I think it was an action role-playing game. Bug 2, both of those were sort of 2.5D platform games. Battle Arena Toshinden Remix. This was a remake of the PlayStation Toshinden, but on the Sega Saturn, and it didn't go quite as well. It sort of served as an emblem of what the PlayStation did better than the Sega Saturn, and was probably not what they intended. Battle Arena Toshinden Ultimate Revenge Attack was a game that they made to sort of make up for this, and it didn't work out. Virtua Fighter, the first Virtua Fighter was a kind of maligned port. People generally like the 32X version better. Guardian Heroes is of course available on XBL and is one of the classic treasure multiplayer games. Virtua Fighter Remix was an attempt to take the botched Virtua Fighter port and add texture mapping to the characters, and for most it did okay. Virtua Fighter 2 did pretty well. Fighting Vipers was a game where you punched your opponent's clothes off. Fighters Megamix was a game where they mixed Virtua Fighting characters and Fighting Vipers characters. Last Bronx was a game with sticks. You hit each other with sticks, you hit your friends with sticks, and I think there was an anime intro. Mr. Bones, I don't think the people that made Mr. Bones knew what they were making, but they made it and it was released on the Sega Saturn. Legend of Oasis, this was the prequel to Beyond Oasis, a game that was made for the Sega Genesis. It was an action RPG. Legend of Oasis had lots of big sprites. Some would say too big. Dark Savior was like Landstalker, but with 3D backgrounds. Dragon Force was kind of like a real-time version of Advanced Wars, but on the Sega Saturn. Shining Force 3 was a strategy RPG. It was supposed to come in 3 different parts, but only the first part made it to North America, and the other 2 parts stayed in Japan. But maybe some plucky young fan might translate them for us. That would be wonderful. Amok was some kind of a shooter. Clockwork Knight 2 was a platformer, the sequel to Clockwork Knight, which wasn't as good. Deep Fear was, of course, Resident Evil, but in like an underwater base. Enemy Zero was a remarkable game for the Sega Saturn. It was a game that you walked around in a spaceship and you couldn't see your enemies, you could only hear them, and you shot at them when you heard them. It was a very exciting game. Lunacy was, I think, some kind of an adventure game. It was a part of the series that was sort of loosely bonded together. There were other versions. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Shining the Holy Ark was, of course, a first-person dungeon crawler like Eye of the Beholder, but in the Shining Force universe. Robotica was a first-person shooter that no one played. Sega Rally was a fast driving game where you drove around in the dirt. Virtual Hide-Glide was a successor to the Hide-Glide game, which was on the Nintendo, but it was in 3D with digitized graphics like Mortal Kombat or Battle Monsters. Magic Knight Ray Earth was the final working designs game to be ported to the Sega Saturn, and Gun Griffin was a mech battle game with a lot of heart. Now, there was a very interesting port, I want you to listen, there's a very interesting port of Quake for the Sega Saturn, and it's not on the list, but I want to talk about it anyway because they had to they had to rebuild the engine from the ground up just for the Sega Saturn, just to get it on the Sega Saturn, and I think they used that same engine with the Duke Nukem for the Sega Saturn. Interesting stuff, not on the list. Gen War was, of course, an action game where you fought a war against the Gen. Sonic R was a racing game where you took Sonic the Hedgehog of platforming Sonic the Hedgehog game fame, and you took away the platforming. You just had him run. It was a fantastically fast game. Nights into Dreams was a spinny game where I think you hit big balls and you had a lot of fun. Sky Target was Afterburner, but with a lot of heart. Golden Axe The Duel was a fighting game set in the Golden Axe universe where you fought Death Adder and all of his minions, and with your friends. It was a hell of a time, and I wish it the best. That was the list. What did you think of the list? Let's go to the phones. Caller, you're on the air with electronic game information. What'd you think of the list? What'd you think of the list? You're on the air with electronic game information. I just read the list of Sega Saturn exclusive games. The last one I read was, I believe, was it Golden Axe the Duel?
Golden Axe for Duel, that's great.
Golden Axe the
Hey,
Duel
Robby.
sounds great, right? You'd think so.
Yeah, it sounds really great.
Well, it didn't get
I got a
great
question
reviews.
for
So
you.
what? It's it's one of those games that I guess some people loved it, some people hate it.
True, looks like a lot of games.
Were you ever? Did you have any Sega Saturn exclusive games that weren't on the list that you wished were on the list?
Nights in the Dreams.
I said Nights into the Dreams. That's the spinny game where you knock things around with balls. I said it. Sonic Team made it. It was a Sega Saturn exclusive. It's on the list. Get that on the record. It's on the list. Next caller, please. Caller, you're on the air with electronic game information. I've just read the list. What did you think of the list?
I love the list. It was so good. I loved Enemy Zero.
Enemy Zero. So you liked it. You were glad that was on the list. Did you notice any other games that were not on the list that that kind of struck you as odd?
Dude, you come 29. I'm sorry, I'm whispering. My friend's watching Disturbia in another room.
What? I'm talking about Virtua Fighter Kids. It was Virtua Fighter what were kids. They had giant heads. Do you remember this?
Yes. I do.
Get him off. Get him off. He's having too much fun. You're on the air with electronic game information. We just talked about the list. I just revealed that Virtua Fighter Kids wasn't on the list, but it should have been on the list. What other games were not on the list?
Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Panzer Dragoon Saga. You seem like a real smart kid. Listen, how many discs were in the original Panzer Dragoon Saga box when they released it in North America?
4.
You're wonderful. Now think of another game that's not on the list.
Panzer Dragoon Wii.
Oh, come on. That's too easy. You want to talk about Burning Rangers.
Okay.
Burning Rangers is a firefighting game with a lot of heart, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would. But
Why did I leave it off the list?
I'm not you. You tell me.
You're not me. I know. You're calling me to talk to me. I'm telling you Burning Rangers isn't on the list. Tell me why Burning Rangers isn't on the list.
Because you forgot?
No. It was written on the list. I glossed over it. I didn't want to look at the name. You know why? I never owned it.
Tell me.
I never owned it.
Me neither.
All right. Next
I
caller,
love those
please.
games, but not that one.
Next caller, please. Good evening. You're on the air with electronic game information. We're talking about the list.
Oh, lists. Well, let me tell you something about lists. I love them. I can't get enough of them. And your list, I love that list.
What's your next words?
Highlight was a very good game.
Hide-Lied. You talking about the
Yeah.
NES Hide-Lied, or you talking about the Sega Saturn exclusive Virtual Hide-Lied?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That was on the list.
Highlight.
We're talking. What game was not on the list you wish was on the list?
Fuck, man, that's a loaded question.
How about High Velocity? High Velocity was a racing game with a lot of heart.
No, Sonic R was better.
What?
It was better.
What did you like better about Sonic R than you liked about High Velocity?
It's got Sonic in it.
What about Cyber Speedway? Cyber Speedway was a racing game with a lot of heart. It had a rock and roll soundtrack. Do you remember Cyber Speedway?
It didn't have Sonic in it.
Didn't have Sonic in it, but it had a lot of heart, wouldn't you say?
Sonic's got a lot of heart. You got a problem with Sonic?
No one's saying that Sonic doesn't have a lot of heart. He clearly has a ton of heart. Hell, I think Sonic has more heart than half the human population of this world. But the fact of the matter is that he wasn't in a number of racing games that I think had a lot of heart, and maybe that shows that all the perfect people that you think are just so great just have a lot of chips taken out of them. We're gonna this is just getting too weird. I think it's weird. And now for a piece where I'd like to talk a little bit about things in the games industry that don't make a lot of sense. It's a segment that I like to call It's Weird. Why can't I plug my headphones directly into my Xbox One controller? Why do I have to buy that weird shape? I don't like it. You know what it reminds me of? The Game Boy Advance SP. You couldn't plug your headphones directly into that either. You had to buy a weird shape. In this day and age, I think that I should be able to plug my headphones into whatever I want. It's weird that I can't. I think it's weird that the Lunar games aren't on PSN. Those are great games, and I think they're popular enough. It couldn't take that much to put them up on PSN. Hell, it's just a website. It's not like they have to print up a bunch of manuals or find a bunch of jewel cases and ship them out to stores. Just put them on the website. It's weird that they haven't done that. And while we're on the subject of PSN games, games that should be on PSN rather, I'd like to talk about Silhouette Mirage and Elemental Gearbolt and Princess Crown. It's just weird that they're not on PSN. Wouldn't you say? What do you think is weird in the games industry? What parts of the games industry do you just kind of make you go, what? Caller, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about what's weird.
Hello?
Good evening. You're on Electronic Game Information, and we're talking about what's weird in the games industry. What do you think is weird?
Yeah, I have to say the amount of war fetishism and stuff like Dead Stranding. What is with Kojima and eating babies?
I don't know what that means, but I think it's weird that Destiny isn't a single-player game. Don't you think that's kind of weird?
It is.
I used to love playing those Halo games. Remember those Halo games? Great single-player campaigns. Yeah. They should do something with that.
Hey, remember Killzone?
Yeah, I remember Killzone. You kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
Hellgast, Helgen, all sorts of H words. A lot of fun, a lot of heart. Tell me, what was your favorite memory about Killzone? What do you think is weird about why people don't talk about Killzone anymore?
I have to find it odd that the villains are blatantly like Nazi types, but they're depicted as like the good guys in the lore as they go out of the way to make them sound like victims.
That is weird. Thank you for your call. Mm-hmm. Next up, you're on Electronic Game Information. We're talking about what's weird in the games industry.
Hey.
Hi, how are you? You're on Electronic Game Information.
Hey, great to hear you.
Great to hear you too. What do you think is weird?
I think it's kind of weird that the Metal Gear Solid games, especially the second and third one when they did the HD remake, aren't available on PS4.
I think that's weird too. I think it's very weird. You know what else I think is weird about the Metal Gear franchise?
What?
Where's Twin Snakes?
That's a very good point.
It should be out. It's weird they haven't put out Twin Snakes again. It was a fantastic remake of one of the greatest video games of all time. You know what else I think is weird?
Compared to like.
I'm talking now. I'm talking now. I'm talking now. You know what I think is weird? The game Black Tiger. The arcade game Black Tiger. The classic Capcom game.
Yeah.
It's like they took Magic Sword and they took all the fun out of it, don't you think?
I mean, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. Thank you for your call. Next up. Hi. Good evening. You're on Electronic Game Information. We're talking about what's weird.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you doing? What's weird with you?
Doing well.
What's weird with the games industry?
What's weird is I thought when Sega released Jet Set Radio, but they had it on the Xbox, not anything else. They didn't have anybody else in it.
Well, that's because they had an exclusivity deal with Xbox. That's not that weird. Happens all the time. Next caller. Hi, you're on Electronic Game Information. We're talking about what's weird in the games industry. What's weird to you, friend?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty weird there hasn't been a Viva Pinata 3.
I don't think that's that weird. That's a pretty niche title. Next caller, please. We have time for one more caller. Caller, you're on the air with electronic game information.
Hey.
How are you doing? What's weird with the games industry?
The obsession with Norman Reedus' weird face.
I don't... What? You know what I think is weird? I think it's weird that they haven't put a collection of those old Apogee games, you know, like Halloween Harry and Alien Carnage and Terminal Velocity. They haven't put a big collection of those out, like on not virtual console, on the Switch eShop. I think that's weird.
That's fucking wild.
I don't know what this other people are talking about. These characters I never heard of.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, thank you for your call. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us. This has been another edition of Electronic Game Information. We are still going to be coming to you live from E3 tomorrow night, so please be sure to tune in. We'll be taking calls all night and talking about the big issues that are pulling E3 through the water, as it were. The water that, being the Pacific Ocean next to the Los Angeles, beautiful downtown Los Angeles. Good night.